The slap echoed through the compound like thunder, and I watched in shock as Amaka crumpled to the ground, clutching her face. Her stepmother, Mama Nneka, stood over her, hands still raised, her eyes sharp with anger. "Lazy girl," Mama Nneka spat, her voice cutting through the evening air. "You think you will sit and eat in my house without working? Not today." I was there, just a neighbor, a young man who often ran errands for families in the village. I had seen things in my life, but nothing prepared me for what I witnessed in that household. Amaka was Mama Nneka's stepdaughter, her late husband's child from another woman. From the day Amaka's father passed, Mama Nneka turned into someone else, like a storm brewing on the horizon. I remember how Amaka used to smile, her eyes bright with hope. She was beautiful and soft-spoken, always greeting people with respect. But now, at 21, she looked older than her age. Her back was bent from endless chores, her palms rough like a farmer's, and her face carried a sadness that never went away. Mama Nneka treated Amaka worse than a servant. She made her fetch water from the farthest stream, carry heavy firewood from the bush, and cook for the entire family, even if she had no food herself. Amaka wasn't allowed to eat until everyone else was satisfied, and by then, it was often scraps or nothing at all. One day, I saw Mama Nneka force Amaka to kneel on sharp stones under the scorching sun because she had accidentally burned a pot of yam. Amaka's knees bled, but she didn't cry out. She just stared at the ground, her face blank like she had given up on the idea of mercy. "Doesn't anybody care?" I whispered to myself that day. People in the village knew what was happening. They whispered about it at the market, at the palm wine joint, and in church. But nobody dared confront Mama Nneka. She was loud, fierce, and had a way of turning stories around to make herself the victim. Then there was me, always watching but doing nothing, until that night. It was a dark, moonless night when I heard the commotion. Mama Nneka's angry voice rang out, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. I rushed to the fence and peered into their compound. Amaka was on the ground again, her face swollen and tear-streaked. Mama Nneka stood over her, wielding a long broomstick like a weapon. I said no. Mama Nneka shouted, "You cannot leave this house until I say so. Do you hear me?" "I just want to go to school," Amaka sobbed. Her words hit me like a blow. Amaka had always talked about finishing her education, but Mama Nneka kept her from it, saying she had no money for school fees. Yet everyone knew Mama Nneka sold baskets of yam and palm oil at the market every week. That night, something inside me snapped. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I pushed the gate open, my heart pounding, and stepped into the compound. "Mama Nneka, enough!" I shouted. She turned, her eyes narrowing as she saw me. "Chijioke, this is not your business. Go back to your house before I teach you a lesson." "But it's my business when someone is being treated like this," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Amaka is not an animal. She deserves better than this." Mama Nneka sneered. "You think you can tell me how to run my house? She's my husband's child, not yours. Get out before I call the elders." I glanced at Amaka. She was shaking, her lips trembling as she tried to hold back tears. Her swollen face was enough proof of the pain she endured daily. "I'm not leaving until you stop this," I said. The argument escalated. Mama Nneka's shouting drew neighbors out of their homes. They gathered around the compound, whispering and exchanging nervous glances. No one dared to step forward. "She's right," a voice finally said. It was Mama Ebere, an older woman known for her wisdom. She stepped into the compound, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist. "We've all seen how you treat Amaka, Mama Nneka. It's not right. If you don't stop, we'll take this to the village elders." Mama Nneka's face twisted in anger, but she didn't respond. More people began to murmur, agreeing with Mama Ebere. She makes the girls suffer like a slave. Even animals are treated better than this. We cannot allow this to continue. Under the weight of the crowd's judgment, Mama Nneka threw the broomstick aside and stormed into the house, slamming the door behind her. Amaka sat there, stunned and silent. I crouched down beside her. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. She nodded slowly but didn't say a word. Her silence spoke of years of bottled-up pain, and I realized this was just the beginning of her healing. The villagers helped Amaka to her feet, offering words of comfort. Mama Ebere took her in that night, promising to protect her until a proper resolution could be found. But even as the compound emptied and the night grew quiet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Mama Nneka wasn't one to back down easily, and I knew she would find a way to strike back. Still, for the first time, Amaka had allies, and for the first time, she wasn't entirely alone. The days that followed were tense. Amaka stayed with Mama Ebere, who treated her with kindness and warmth, but there was always a sense of unease in the air. Mama Nneka didn't say a word to anyone, but her silence was more dangerous than her shouting. One evening, as the village gathered for a community meeting at the square, Mama Nneka finally made her move. She stood up in front of the elders and the villagers, her wrapper tied tightly and her face set in a mask of feigned sorrow. "I've been accused of mistreating my stepdaughter," she began, her voice quivering. "But these are lies. I have done nothing but care for that girl since my husband died. She is ungrateful and rebellious, and now she has turned the whole village against me." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shaking their heads. I felt a chill run down my spine. She was twisting the story, as everyone feared she would. Mama Ebere stood up, her voice calm but firm. "We've all seen the scars on Amaka's body, Mama Nneka. We've heard her cries late into the night. Are you calling us all liars?" Mama Nneka's face darkened, but she forced a weak smile. "Children fall and hurt themselves all the time. She's clumsy, that's all." It was Amaka's turn to speak. She stood slowly, her head held high despite the fear in her eyes. "You say you cared for me," she said, her voice steady but soft. "But you made me work from dawn till night without rest. You beat me for mistakes I didn't make. You called me worthless, even though I tried my best to please you. Why didn't you let me go to school?" Amaka continued. "Why did you make me kneel on stones when I burned food by mistake? Is that what you call care?" Mama Nneka's mask cracked, her face twisted in anger, and she pointed a trembling finger at Amaka. "You see, this is how she repays me, with lies and disrespect." "She's not lying," I said, stepping forward. My voice was shaky, but I didn't care. "I've seen it with my own eyes. We all have." The elders exchanged glances, their faces stern. The head elder, a man with a long white beard, raised his hand for silence. "Mama Nneka," he said, his voice deep and authoritative, "if these accusations are true, you have not only failed your duty as a stepmother, but also disgraced this community. We cannot allow such cruelty to go unchecked." Mama Nneka opened her mouth to argue, but the elder cut her off. "You will be summoned to face judgment before the council. Until then, Amaka will remain under the care of Mama Ebere. If you are found guilty, you will be punished accordingly." The villagers nodded in agreement, and Mama Nneka's protest died in her throat. She stormed away, her shoulders stiff with rage. That night, Amaka sat quietly on Mama Ebere's porch, staring at the stars. I joined her, unsure of what to say. "Thank you," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, surprised. "For what?" "For standing up for me," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "No one's ever done that before." I nodded, my chest tight with emotion. "You didn't deserve what she did to you. You're stronger than you know, Amaka." She smiled faintly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. But deep down, I knew the fight wasn't over. Mama Nneka was like a snake, and snakes didn't give up easily. This was just the beginning of Amaka's journey to reclaim her life, and I would be there to see her through it. A few weeks later, the village seemed calmer, but there was an underlying tension. Mama Nneka wasn't one to accept defeat quietly. True to her nature, she was scheming, and her target this time was Mama Ebere. One morning, the village woke up to commotion. Mama Nneka was standing in the middle of the marketplace, wailing loudly and calling for the elders. She held a small bundle wrapped in cloth, her voice carrying over the morning chatter. "Wickedness, betrayal," she cried. "The woman you all trust, Mama Ebere, is no better than a thief." Curious villagers gathered around, their faces puzzled. The elders arrived shortly after, their walking sticks tapping on the dusty ground. "What is the meaning of this, Mama Nneka?" the head elder asked, his voice heavy with authority. Mama Nneka knelt dramatically, clutching the bundle as if it were a lifeline. "What is the meaning of this, Mama Elders? My heart is heavy. I have been wrongfully accused of mistreating Amaka, but now I have proof that Mama Ebere has been stealing from my household." She unwrapped the bundle, revealing pieces of gold jewelry and a wad of cash. Gasps rippled through the crowd. These were found hidden in Mama Ebere's backyard. Mama Nneka declared, "She has been pretending to care for Amaka while stealing from me all along." She unwrapped the bundle, revealing pieces of gold jewelry and a wad of cash. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mama Ebere stepped forward, her face calm but her eyes filled with disbelief. "That is a lie," she said firmly. "I have never taken anything from you, Mama Nneka, and I don't even know where you got those things." But Mama Nneka was prepared. "I have a witness," she said, gesturing to a scruffy-looking young man who stepped hesitantly into the circle. "I saw her," the man mumbled, avoiding eye contact with anyone. "She buried the items in her backyard late at night." The villagers murmured among themselves. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered doubts about Mama Ebere. The elders exchanged glances before the head elder spoke. "We will investigate this matter thoroughly. If Mama Ebere is innocent, the truth will come to light. But if she is guilty, she will face the consequences." Mama Ebere stood tall, her voice unwavering. "I have nothing to hide. You may search my home." The elders and a group of villagers followed Mama Ebere to her house. As they approached, Amaka, who had been helping with chores, looked up in confusion. "What's happening?" she asked. "They are here to search for stolen items," Mama Ebere said, her voice steady despite the insult. The search began. The villagers combed through the small house and the surrounding yard. Mama Ebere stood quietly, her hands clasped together, while Amaka watched nervously. After an hour, the elders called everyone back to the compound. "We have found nothing," one of them announced. "There is no evidence that Mama Ebere is guilty of theft." Mama Nneka's face fell, but she quickly recovered. "She must have moved the items. That doesn't mean she didn't take them." The head elder frowned. "Enough, Mama Nneka. This accusation is beginning to feel like a ploy to divert attention from your own wrongdoing." Amaka stepped forward, her voice firm. "Mama Nneka is lying. I saw that young man she brought as a witness sneaking around her house last night." The crowd turned to the scruffy man, who immediately looked panicked. Under the elder's intense gaze, he began to stammer. I didn't mean to," he muttered, his words tumbling out incoherently. "Speak the truth," the head elder commanded. Finally, the man broke down. "It was Mama Nneka. She paid me to bury the things and say I saw Mama Ebere do it. Adana." Gasps erupted from the crowd. Mama Nneka's face turned pale as the elders turned their stern eyes on her. "You have not only mistreated Amaka, but also tried to frame an innocent woman," the head elder said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Your actions are shameful, and you will face severe punishment. Mama Nneka tried to protest, but the villagers were no longer on her side. They dragged her to the council house, where her fate would be decided. As the crowd dispersed, Amaka turned to Mama Ebere. I'm so sorry you were dragged into this because of me. Mama Ebere smiled gently, placing a hand on Amaka's shoulder. You don't need to apologize, my child. Truth always has a way of coming out, no matter how hard people try to bury it. For the first time in years, Amaka felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Mama Nneka's grip on her life was finally slipping, and though the road ahead was uncertain, she was no longer walking it alone. The news spread quickly. Mama Nneka, despite being disgraced, was plotting again. This time, she was seen visiting the senior elder late at night. Whispers rippled through the village that she was desperate to regain control over Amaka. A week later, during a public gathering, the senior elder made an unexpected announcement. After much deliberation, he began, his voice steady but unusually cold. The council has decided that Amaka must return to her stepmother's house. It is her rightful home, and Mama Nneka has promised to amend her ways. The villagers erupted into murmurs of disbelief. Mama Ebere, sitting with Amaka, shot up to her feet. The villagers erupted into murmurs of disbelief. Mama Ebere, sitting with Amaka, shot up to her feet. This is unfair, she said, her voice trembling with anger. Everyone knows what Mama Nneka has done. How can you send Amaka back to that house? The villagers erupted into murmurs of disbelief. Mama Ebere, sitting with Amaka, shot up to her feet. The senior elder raised a hand to silence her. Mama Nneka has assured us that she will treat Amaka with respect and care moving forward. It is not our place to keep a child away from her guardian without just cause. The villagers erupted into murmurs of disbelief. Mama Ebere, sitting with Amaka, shot up to her feet. Mama Nneka, standing at the edge of the crowd, smirked slightly but quickly masked it with a look of fake humility. I only want what's best for Amaka, she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. I have made mistakes, but I am ready to make things right. The villagers erupted into murmurs of disbelief. Mama Ebere, sitting with Amaka, shot up to her feet. Amaka stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to scream, to tell them it was all lies, but fear held her tongue. Mama Ebere wasn't so easily silenced. This decision makes no sense, she said, glaring at the senior elder. What did she offer you to make you betray this Kai? The crowd gasped, and the elder's face darkened. Mind your words, Mama Ebere. The council's decision is final. Despite the protests, Amaka was ordered to return to Mama Nneka's house that same day. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged Mama Ebere tightly. Stay strong, my child, Mama Ebere whispered. We will find a way to protect you. Back in Mama Nneka's house, things were worse than before. She no longer hid her cruelty. You think you can humiliate me in front of the village and get away with it? She hissed one night as Amaka scrubbed the floors. You will learn who is in charge here. Amaka was forced to work harder, eat less, and endure more beatings. Mama Nneka made sure to keep her suffering hidden from the public, threatening her into silence. But Amaka wasn't the same girl anymore. The support she had received from Mama Ebere and the villagers had lit a fire inside her. She began to document everything, each bruise, each insult, and every act of mistreatment. She confided in Chijioke, who promised to help her expose the truth once and for all. One night, Amaka overheard Mama Nneka talking to the senior elder in hushed tones. I paid you to keep her here, Mama Nneka whispered. Make sure the council doesn't interfere again. Amaka's heart raced. This was the evidence she needed. She quietly slipped away, determined to use this information to turn the tide. The next day, with Chijioke's help, Amaka gathered the villagers at the square. She stood trembling but determined as she addressed them. I have something to say, she began, her voice shaking but growing stronger with each word. Mama Nneka bribed the senior elder to force me back into her house. And she hasn't changed. She's only gotten worse. Gasps filled the air as Amaka recounted her recent suffering. She showed the bruises on her arms and legs, her voice breaking as she described the nights she cried herself to sleep. "She doesn't care about me," Amaka said, her eyes filling with tears. "All she cares about is her pride and control." The villagers looked at Mama Nneka, whose face was pale with shock. The senior elder, standing nearby, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Chijioke stepped forward. "I have witnessed her cruelty firsthand, and Amaka isn't lying. I believe her." Mama Ebere, who had been standing at the back, pushed her way forward. "Enough is enough," she said firmly. "This child deserves justice." The head elder turned to the senior elder, his expression stern. "Is it true? Did you accept bribes from Mama Nneka?" The senior elder stammered, but before he could deny it, Amaka pulled out a small piece of paper. "This is a note I found in Mama Nneka's room," she said. "It lists how much she paid you and when." The senior elder's face fell, and the crowd erupted in outrage. The head elder raised his hand for silence. "This is a grave offense," he said, his voice cold. "Mama Nneka and the senior elder will both face the council's judgment." As Mama Nneka and the senior elder were escorted away, Amaka felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in years, she was free. Mama Ebere embraced her tightly. "You're brave, my child," she said. "Braver than most adults I know." Weeks passed, and life in the village began to return to normal. Amaka stayed with Mama Ebere, finally experiencing peace for the first time. The council had exiled Mama Nneka after her crimes were exposed, and the disgraced senior elder had resigned in shame. But one eerie night, the village's fragile calm shattered. It was late, the moon casting a faint glow over the quiet homes. Amaka had just finished washing the dishes and was heading to her room when she heard it, a low, familiar hum coming from the gate. Her blood ran cold. It was Mama Nneka's voice. One eerie night, the village's fragile calm shattered. It was late, the moon casting a faint glow over the quiet homes. Amaka had just finished washing the dishes and was heading to her room when she heard it, a low, familiar hum coming from the gate. Her blood ran cold. It was Mama Nneka's voice. Mama Ebere, startled, grabbed her lantern and rushed to the door. By the time they stepped outside, the singing had stopped. The compound was silent, the shadows long and eerie. "Are you sure, my child?" Mama Ebere asked, her voice steady but low. "I know her voice," Amaka said, clutching Mama Ebere's arm. "I'm not imagining it." The two women scanned the yard, but there was no sign of anyone, just a faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. The next morning, whispers spread like wildfire. Mama Nneka had been spotted near the edge of the village, her head covered with a faded scarf. No one knew how she had returned or why. She was exiled. Chijioke said, frowning as he joined Amaka and Mama Ebere at the marketplace. How could she have found her way back? And why would she risk it? "She's not here to apologize, that's for sure," Mama Ebere said grimly. That evening, Amaka couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced over her shoulder repeatedly, but each time, there was nothing there, just shadows and the occasional stray dog. Mama Ebere slowly unlatched the gate and swung it open. Standing there, illuminated by the faint glow of the lantern, was Mama Nneka. Her face was gaunt, her clothes tattered, but her eyes burned with the same cruel intensity. "You thought you could get rid of me," Mama Nneka hissed, her voice low but venomous. "You thought you could humiliate me and take what's mine. You were banished for your wickedness," Mama Ebere said firmly, stepping protectively in front of Amaka. "Leave now before the elders find out you're back." Mama Nneka laughed, a chilling, hollow sound. "The elders? They're nothing. Do you think they can stop me? This girl belongs to me, and I will not leave without her. Amaka clung to Mama Ebere, her voice shaking. I'm not going with you. You have no power over me anymore. Mama Nneka's face twisted in anger. You think these people will protect you forever? Mark my words. Amaka, you will regret this. Before Mama Ebere could respond, Mama Nneka turned and disappeared into the darkness. The next few days were filled with unease. Mama Nneka's presence loomed like a dark cloud over the village. She was rarely seen but often heard, her tuneless humming drifting through the night, her shadow flickering at the edges of the compound. Why hasn't the council done anything? Amaka asked Chijioke one afternoon. They don't know where she's staying, Chijioke said. She's hiding somewhere, waiting for the right moment to strike. Amaka knew he was right. Mama Nneka was like a snake, patient and calculating, and until she was stopped, no one would truly be safe. But Amaka wasn't the same frightened girl anymore. She had survived too much to let Mama Nneka control her life again. I won't let her win, she said, her voice steady. Not this time. Mama Ebere and Chijioke exchanged worried glances but said nothing. They could see the determination in Amaka's eyes, and they knew she wouldn't back down. Not now, not ever. The question was, how far would Mama Nneka go to reclaim what she believed was hers? And how would they fight back against a woman who seemed to thrive on chaos and fear? Mama Nneka's presence turned the village into a tense battlefield. By day, she was a ghost, her whereabouts unknown. By night, her humming or the sound of stones tapping against doors reminded everyone she was near. The elders convened urgently, but without knowing her exact location, they could do little but warn the villagers to remain vigilant. Amaka tried to stay strong, but the strain was evident. She rarely slept, haunted by the thought of Mama Nneka sneaking into the compound. Mama Ebere, too, was on edge, her once warm smiles replaced by a constant look of worry. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Chijioke rushed into Mama Ebere's compound, his face pale. She's been spotted, he said breathlessly. At the old abandoned hut near the river, Mama Ebere frowned. That place? It's been deserted for years. Exactly, Chijioke said. No one would think to look for her there. But some children playing by the river saw smoke rising from the chimney. Amaka felt a chill run down her spine. The old hut had a reputation. It was where travelers sometimes stayed, but also where strange occurrences were rumored to happen. If Mama Nneka was hiding there, it meant she wasn't just avoiding the villagers. She was planning something. The discovery sent chills through the village. The elders, now more determined, set up watch groups to patrol the village at night. Amaka, though terrified, refused to let fear consume her. Mama Nneka's presence turned the village into a tense battlefield. By day, she was a ghost, her whereabouts unknown. By night, her humming or the sound of stones tapping against doors reminded everyone she was near. The elders convened urgently, but without knowing her exact location, they could do little but warn the villagers to remain vigilant. Amaka tried to stay strong, but the strain was evident. She rarely slept, haunted by the thought of Mama Nneka sneaking into the compound. Mama Ebere, too, was on edge, her once warm smiles replaced by a constant look of worry. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Chijioke rushed into Mama Ebere's compound, his face pale. She's been spotted, he said breathlessly. At the old abandoned hut near the river, Mama Ebere frowned. That place? It's been deserted for years. Exactly, Chijioke said. No one would think to look for her there. But some children playing by the river saw smoke rising from the chimney. Amaka felt a chill run down her spine. The old hut had a reputation. It was where travelers sometimes stayed, but also where strange occurrences were rumored to happen. If Mama Nneka was hiding there, it meant she wasn't just avoiding the villagers. She was planning something. That night, a knock came at the door again, followed by the sound of Mama Nneka's voice. Amaka, she called softly, come outside. Let's talk. Amaka froze, her heart pounding. Mama Ebere grabbed her hand and pulled her away from the door. She's testing you, Mama Ebere whispered. Don't respond. The knocking stopped, but her voice persisted. You think hiding will save you, Mama Nneka said, her tone turning menacing. You'll have to face me sooner or later. When you do, I'll make sure you regret everything. Suddenly, the sound of retreating footsteps filled the air. Mama Ebere peeked through the window to ensure she was gone, then bolted the door tighter. This has to end, Mama Ebere said. Tomorrow, we go to the elders and confront this once and for all. The next morning, Amaka, Mama Ebere, and Chijioke stood before the council, recounting the events of the previous night. The head elder listened intently, his expression grave. Mama Nneka's exile was meant to protect this village and this child, he said. If she has defied the council's orders, we must act decisively. He motioned to a younger elder. Assemble the men. We'll search the hut near the river. By midday, a group of men, armed with sticks and machetes, approached the old hut. Smoke still rose faintly from the chimney. Inside, they found a small fire burning in the hearth and remnants of a meal. But Mama Nneka was gone. She must have known we were coming, Chijioke said, frustration in his voice. She's always one step ahead. Mama Nneka's exile was meant to protect this village and this child, he said. If she has defied the council's orders, we must act decisively. He motioned to a younger elder. Assemble the men. We'll search the hut near the river. By midday, a group of men, armed with sticks and machetes, approached the old hut. Smoke still rose faintly from the chimney. Inside, they found a small fire burning in the hearth and remnants of a meal. But Mama Nneka was gone. She must have known we were coming, Chijioke said, frustration in his voice. She's always one step ahead. One of the men picked up a small notebook lying on a wooden table. He flipped through the pages and gasped. Look at this. Inside were crude drawings of Amaka's face, each one scratched over with red marks. Beneath them were strange symbols and phrases scrawled in a language no one understood. It's a warning, another man said, his voice trembling. She's not done with Amaka. She's planning something worse. Inside were crude drawings of Amaka's face, each one scratched over with red marks. Beneath them were strange symbols and phrases scrawled in a language no one understood. The discovery sent chills through the village. The elders, now more determined, set up watch groups to patrol the village at night. Amaka, though terrified, refused to let fear consume her. She wants me to be scared, she told Mama Ebere one evening. But I can't live like this. If she wants to fight, I'll fight back.